What if the quiet taxi driver you passed by every day was actually a billionaire on a mission from heaven? In part one of the Billionaire Double Life, the Billionaire Taxi Man, a hidden empire of kindness, we met Lemmy, a gentleman in Johannesburg who drove a faded minibus taxi, shared gospel wisdom without a microphone, and wiped passenger seats before anyone got in. But behind his quiet smile was a vow, a sacred promise made on a hospital bench after he lost everything. When hunger silenced his pride, when rejection broke his strength, he prayed, not for riches, but for purpose. And God answered. From taxi rides to miracles, Lemmy began lifting others quietly, paying hospital bills, saving schoolgirls, and funding charities in secret. His story wasn't about being noticed, it was about being faithful. But in today's world where everyone wants to go viral, Lemmy chose to remain invisible, so only God would be seen. Welcome to part 2 with sub-theme, Grace in the Shadows, the man they tried to bury. The Billionaire Taxi Man, a hidden empire of kindness, a story of betrayal, accusations, a secret nearly exposed, and grace that speaks louder than scandal. Before we begin, if you believe stories like this can heal, inspire, and transform, don't forget to subscribe to African Gospel Tales. Click the notification bell and share this video with someone who needs light today. Because sometimes, all it takes is one true story to remind someone God still works in silence, and greatness still wears humility. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Matthew, chapter 5, verse 16. Now, let's begin. Trouble doesn't always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it arrives with a whisper, soft, sly, and sharp enough to cut a man's legacy in half. It began one cloudy Thursday. At Mercy Hill Primary School, a teenage girl named Santo sat on the school steps, tears in her eyes, a letter of suspension in her hand. Her school fees were overdue. Her mother, who sold roasted groundnuts near the city train station, had begged the bursar that morning. But rules were rules. No payment, no class, they told her. That same afternoon, while Santo walked home with swollen eyes and empty books, she passed a group of students whispering. You heard what they said? About the old taxi man? Yes, they say he gives money to girls. Not to everyone, only some, Santo too. But Santo is broke. Exactly. That's why she's angry. Maybe he dropped her. That's how the devil dances, in circles of gossip and doubt. By the next day, the story had legs. The staff room began buzzing. Have you ever wondered where that Lemmy gets his money? He paid full hospital bills. Who does that? And didn't he once donate food items to the clinic? Something is not adding up, one teacher even joked. Maybe he's running from Interpol. The room laughed. But outside the school walls, the laughter grew teeth. A woman at the market stall said, My daughter said the taxi man gave her sweets and said, Be strong, child. That's suspicious, isn't it? Another replied, No man just helps girls for free. And just like that, suspicion became accusation. That evening, a silent message passed through the district office. Subject, suspicious activity. Unverified benefactor visiting teenage girls. They didn't say his name outright, but everyone knew who it was. And in the cold language of bureaucratic fear, they began to prepare a visit. Meanwhile, Lemmy was at a charity center near Yeovil, helping organize winter jackets for displaced families. He smiled gently as a young boy tried on a coat 2 sizes too big. He knelt, adjusted the sleeves, and whispered, Now you look like a future CEO. Outside that door, the world was twisting his kindness into a noose. By 7 p.m., Lemmy sat under a fig tree, reading his Bible by torchlight. He paused on this verse. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans 12:21. He didn't know he was being watched, whispered about, labeled. But heaven knew. Friday morning arrived with the smell of rain. Lemmy was already at the taxi park, wiping his dusty mirrors with an old towel, humming a gospel chorus under his breath. "Though the storm may rise, I will trust in you." He didn't notice the two black SUVs parked at the far end of the park, engines still running, men inside with serious eyes and tight lips. At 9:14 a.m., a stern-looking social services official, flanked by a plainclothes officer and a reporting agent from child welfare, stepped out. One of them held a brown file marked "Confidential." They approached Lemmy's taxi slowly. "Mr. Lemmy, yes?" the lady asked, arms crossed. Lemmy stood upright and nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. How may I help you?" "You've been mentioned in an open report. We have reason to believe you've been engaging with underage girls in a questionable manner." Lemmy blinked, slowly. The words didn't sink in all at once. "Excuse me," he said, calmly but firmly. The plainclothes officer stepped forward. "You may not be under arrest yet, sir, but we advise you to cooperate fully. These are serious claims, especially considering your anonymity." Lemmy looked down. Not in shame, but in shock. In his heart a prayer rose, quiet as a whisper. "Father, let truth walk louder than noise." The lady continued. "A young girl named Santo was suspended recently. Rumors link her emotional breakdown to an inappropriate relationship with you." Lemmy's jaw clenched, not from fear, but from a deep grief. "I have never," he began, but his voice trembled. He paused, collected himself, and tried again. "I have never touched, spoken to, or looked at that child inappropriately. I do not give with conditions. I do not serve to be seen." The plainclothes man interrupted. "We will need access to your financial activities, your weekly movements, and a written report by Monday." Then came the worst part. A woman from the market, one of the mothers, walked past, pointed, and muttered loudly, "That's him. The one who hides his face but gives money. I knew something was off." Another passerby paused. "Is he being arrested?" "No," someone else said, "but I heard he buys silence." The words stung deeper than bullets, not because they were true, but because they were louder than the truth. That evening, Lemmy didn't drive home. He sat inside the church compound, alone, in the last pew. No music, no preaching, just silence. Tears fell, not from fear of prison or shame, but from the heartbreak of being misunderstood for obeying God. He remembered his vow that night near the hospital generator. "If you lift me, I will lift others and never take the glory." So he prayed again, not for vindication, but for grace. "Lord, they don't know me, but you do. If this is the path, then I'll walk it with you. But please, protect the seed of faith in those who still believe in love." Just then, a hand touched his shoulder. It was Rashid, the young taxi conductor who had always admired him quietly. "I heard what they said," Rashid whispered, "and I don't believe it." Lemmy turned slowly, his eyes red. Rashid added, "Sir, even if the whole world turns, some of us know who you are, not by words, but by your walk." Lemmy's lips trembled. He reached for his Bible and turned to Isaiah 54:17. "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord." He closed the Bible softly and whispered, "Then let them speak. My defense is not in shouting, but in still standing." The rain begins to fall, not violently, but steadily, like the washing of wounds. And somewhere in that soft rain, heaven was still watching. By Sunday morning, the gossip had spread faster than the gospel. WhatsApp groups were flooded. Taxi drivers debated in hushed voices. Some passengers refused to enter Lemmy's minibus. Others stared at him from a distance, half curious, half suspicious. Lemmy, as usual, wore his faded shirt, his gentle smile, and his silence. But in the background, something powerful was brewing. Truth. Not everyone believed the rumors. One of the first to step forward was Mama Clara, Keziah's mother. She barged into the office of the Child Welfare Department, her wrapper tight, her eyes blazing. "Which of you wrote this nonsense?" she demanded. The startled receptionist blinked. "Ma, please calm down." "I will not calm down. That man carried my daughter like his own child, paid her bills without saying a word. He vanished before I could even ask his name. And now you say he's what? A predator?" The director, hearing the noise, stepped out. Mama Clara walked up to him, trembling with emotion. "If you want to arrest someone," she said, "arrest me for not thanking him properly. But if this is how you repay kindness, then may heaven judge this city." She stormed out, but not before dropping a signed written statement. "Lemmy is innocent. He helped when nobody else did." Across the city, another voice rose, this time from Pastor Samuel, the same man who had found Lemmy outside the hospital years ago. He stood on his pulpit, Bible in hand, speaking boldly. "Some of you share scandal faster than Scripture. You love juicy gossip more than justice. But I stand today to say, Lemmy is a son of this house, a giver in silence, a man of integrity. You may accuse him, but his fruit speaks louder than your words." The congregation erupted in murmurs. "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone," Pastor thundered. Back at the taxi park, Rashid started his own quiet campaign. He printed small flyers with a message, "Judge a tree by its fruit, not by its shadow. Support truth, protect grace, #Justice for Lemmy." He handed them out silently. He even created a WhatsApp status update. "Real men don't brag, they build. Lemmy is one of them." And then came the moment no one expected. Santo, the same girl at the center of the rumor, came forward. She recorded a video on her aunt's phone. In it, she said, "I was suspended from school for fighting. I made up the story because I was angry at the world. Lemmy never touched me, never even spoke to me. I'm sorry, please forgive me." That video went viral. By Monday morning, everything had changed. The same taxi drivers who avoided Lemmy's van were now offering him food and handshakes. Passengers greeted him with new respect. Mama Clara showed up with kazaya and a thank you gift wrapped in African print. Even the director from Child Welfare called personally to apologize. "Mr. Lemmy," he said, "we are deeply sorry. May your kind never disappear." Lemmy, in his usual gentle way, said only this, "I hold nothing against anyone, but may we all learn. Not every quiet man is hiding evil. Some are hiding obedience." Gospel truth. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans 12:21. African proverb. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Weeks had passed. The city had gone quiet again. Lemmy's name had shifted from rumor to reverence, but heaven was preparing another test. One afternoon, as Lemmy cleaned the inside of his minibus, a sleek black SUV pulled into the taxi park. Two men in suits stepped out, flashing government badges. "Mr. Lemuel Nkosi?" one of them asked respectfully. Lemmy stood, wiping his hands on his handkerchief. "Yes, sir. You're invited to the National Service and Honor Banquet, by special recommendation of the President." Lemmy blinked. They handed him a gold-trimmed envelope. Inside was a formal invitation, his full name printed in bold with words he never thought he'd read. "In recognition of extraordinary acts of quiet heroism and charitable service, you are to be honored as one of South Africa's unsung legends." Rashid, who was nearby, almost dropped the tire he was lifting. "Baba Lemmy, you're going to the State House?" he whispered in awe. Lemmy smiled, but deep inside, a storm began to brew. That night, Lemmy sat alone on his mattress, invitation in one hand, Bible in the other. He remembered the vow. "Lord, I will never seek credit. I will just serve, quietly, always." But this wasn't self-seeking. It was recognition from others. Was it wrong to accept? He prayed and waited. The next day, he met Pastor Samuel for counsel. The pastor listened carefully, then said, "David was anointed king long before he sat on the throne. Joseph was promoted to the palace after prison. Your story is not for you to hide. Sometimes God uses our scars to remind others that healing is possible. But sir, Lemmy said, if I go, will I break my vow? Pastor Samuel smiled gently. Only if you go to be praised, but if you go to point others to the one who lifted you, then your silence becomes a trumpet in his hand. Scene shifts to the banquet night. Under shimmering lights and polished floors, South Africa's best and brightest gathered. Ministers, business moguls. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. Please welcome Lemuel Nkosi, philanthropist, entrepreneur, and man of silent mercy. People clapped. But Lemmy didn't walk out alone. He came up holding the hands of 2 children, orphans from his school in Soweto. As he reached the podium, he didn't lift the award, he lifted his Bible. I stand here today because one night, under a hospital roof, I had no food, no friends, and no future. But God heard a broken man's vow. This award is not for me, it is a reminder that heaven still listens. The hall went silent. Tears fell. Even the president stood up to clap. As Lemmy left the stage, he gave the award to one of the children. Here, let this remind you, you don't need a big name to make a big impact. African proverb. When the roots remain, the tree will always rise again. Biblical truth. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. 1 Peter 5:6. Lessons from Lemmy. Obedience often leads to honor, but the moment honor becomes your goal, obedience dies. From Pastor Samuel. Sometimes your testimony is someone else's instruction manual. From Rashid. Every quiet life has a loud assignment. Respect the unseen heroes. 2 months later, a young journalist named Naledi Chabalala sat in a dimly lit room, flipping through old tax records and donation files for a feature titled, The Secret Hands Behind the Nation's Healing. She paused. A name kept popping up, L. Nkosi, always tied to anonymous donations, land leases for orphanages, debt payments for churches, and private school scholarships. Her eyes widened. Wait, Lemmy? She whispered. Lemuel Nkosi? She picked up her phone and typed quickly. In seconds, images surfaced. Lemmy's minibus, his modest clothes, his faded shoes. And next to it, a photo from the National Honor Banquet, a suited man holding children, a Bible, and a smile. Same face, same eyes. You're a billionaire, Naledi whispered. And nobody knows? She had her story. The headline was ready. The Billionaire Taxi Man, a hidden empire of kindness. But something tugged at her. She remembered how Lemmy walked out of the banquet, not to a private jet, but back to his old minibus. No security, no drama, just quiet purpose. Naledi did something no one expected. She met Lemmy. A park bench. Lemmy and Naledi sit under a tree. Sir, she says, I found out who you really are. Lemmy nods, calm. She continues, this story could change my career, but I had to ask why the secrecy. Lemmy looks into the sky, then says, because some stories are not for newspapers, they're for heaven's records. And not all fame is promotion. Some are traps wearing makeup. Naledi frowns. But don't people deserve to know? He replies. If it inspires them to give God glory, yes. But if it turns them to worship the giver, not the giver, then I've failed. Naledi went home and changed the article. She renamed it, The Man Who Pointed Up. And in the article, she never mentioned Lemmy's wealth, only his vow, his service, his God. Final conclusion. The vow kept. In the heart of a noisy city among vendors and vans, there lived a man who could have ruled like a king, but chose instead to serve like a shadow. He built schools without signing the gates. He built clinics without cutting ribbons. He lifted hundreds and remained unknown to most. But to heaven, Lemmy's name rang like a trumpet of obedience. Lessons for daily life. Let your identity be hidden if it allows Christ to be revealed. Use your riches to build others, not just your reputation. A vow to God is more sacred than a crown before men. Matthew 6, verse 3. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Proverbs chapters 27, verse 2. Let another praise you, and not your own mouth, a stranger, and not your own lips. Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 through 24. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. So, dear viewer, what if the greatest power isn't found in wealth, but in worship? What if your biggest assignment isn't to be seen, but to be faithful? Like Lemmy, you may never trend, but heaven will never forget your hands, your heart, and your vow. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this message from African Gospel Tales. You never know who might need to hear that God still honors quiet obedience.